On a frigid December night in 2008, within a secluded villa nestled amidst the bustling modern landscape of Seoul, an event unfolded that would forever alter the fate of one of South Korea's most feared crime lords. His newborn twins, delicate and seemingly fragile, heirs to a vast, shadowy empire, were born with a cruel twist of fate. Silent, unmoving, and confined to a world he, a man of absolute control, could neither comprehend nor command. Yet, it was not merely the bleak medical prognosis that would ultimately shake him to his core, but the quiet, forbidden bond forming between his disabled children and the foreign nanny he had reluctantly hired. A bond that exposed a vulnerability he never knew he possessed. A chink in the formidable armor of Lee Jae-won. Before we delve into this extraordinary tale, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Lee Jae-won, the very name whispered with a mixture of dread and grudging respect across the underworld, was the undisputed, ruthless leader of the Black Serpent Syndicate. His reputation preceded him like a chilling wind, an invisible force that instilled fear in his enemies and unquestioning loyalty in his subordinates. He was a man forged in the crucible of power struggles, his resolve as unyielding as tempered steel. His iron grip on Seoul's most lucrative illicit enterprises was legendary, his unwavering control absolute. He resided in a fortified, opulent mansion, a sprawling testament to his power and wealth. Its high walls and advanced security systems, a clear declaration that within its confines, his word was law, and his domain impenetrable. For years, the one missing piece in his meticulously constructed life had been an heir, a successor to carry on the formidable legacy of the Black Serpent. His wife, a woman of delicate beauty and quiet grace, was now pregnant with twins, a double blessing that promised to cement his dynasty. The anticipation for their birth was immense, a palpable tension that hummed through the very foundations of the mansion. Every detail was meticulously planned, every possible contingency accounted for, from the discreetly arranged medical team to the heightened security surrounding the estate. This birth was not just a family event, it was a promise of succession, a declaration of continued dominance. Then came the night of the birth, a night that began with hushed excitement, but rapidly devolved into a medical emergency. Doctors and nurses, brought in under the tightest security protocols, moved with an urgency that belied their calm demeanors. Hours stretched into an eternity, filled with the sterile scent of antiseptics and the muted sounds of hushed conversations. Finally, the devastating news arrived, delivered with somber faces and averted gazes. The twins, both boys, had been born with severe cerebral palsy. They were unable to move, unable to speak, their small bodies trapped in a silent, unresponsive world. In that moment, Jae-won's world shattered. His dreams of powerful, commanding heirs, of a legacy passed down with strength and vigor, crumbled into dust. The impenetrable fortress of his will had found its first agonizing crack. Desperate, yet unwilling to accept the bleak pronouncements of the Korean medical establishment, Jae-won's advisors suggested a radical solution: a foreign nurse specialized in complex developmental needs. And so, Amina, a young Black woman from America, arrived in Seoul. She was highly qualified, her credentials impeccable, yet her presence, a stark contrast to the homogeneous Korean household, was met with a mixture of skepticism, thinly veiled prejudice, and outright suspicion. The staff, accustomed to the rigid hierarchies and cultural norms, viewed her with a guarded curiosity. Amina, for her part, entered this alien world with a quiet determination, her initial interactions with the silent, unresponsive twins marked by a profound empathy. She spoke to them, touched them with a tenderness that seemed almost out of place in the cold, sterile nursery, observing their unmoving forms with an unwavering gaze. It was during these early days that Amina offered a first, faint glimpse of connection. Her gentle touch, her soft, melodic voice as she hummed lullabies, stood in stark contrast to the sterile, clinical environment that had enveloped the twins since birth. She spent hours simply holding them, whispering to them, her presence a warm, living embrace. She began to observe subtle, almost imperceptible reactions from the infants. A slight flutter of an eyelid, a faint tightening of a tiny fist, a momentary stillness that hinted at a deeper awareness. A flicker of hope, fragile yet persistent, ignited within her, challenging the doctor's bleak prognosis, suggesting that perhaps, just perhaps, there was more to these silent children than met the eye. Jae-won, observing from the shadows through hidden cameras, dismissed it as wishful thinking, a desperate attempt by a hired hand to find meaning where there was none. Yet, despite his hardened cynicism, a tiny seed of curiosity, an unbidden question, was planted deep within his formidable mind. Amina, undeterred by the household's skepticism and the twins' initial unresponsiveness, threw herself into her work with an almost ferocious dedication. She spent countless hours researching, devouring medical journals, and experimenting with various therapeutic approaches. She understood that conventional wisdom had failed these children, and therefore, unconventional methods might be their only hope. She sang to the twins in a low, soothing voice, her melodies a balm in the silent nursery. She told them stories of her homeland, of vast landscapes and vibrant cultures, treating them not as inert patients, but as fully aware, sentient individuals trapped within their own bodies. Every gesture, every whispered word, was imbued with the profound belief that connection was possible, that understanding lay dormant within them, waiting to be awakened. Her methods, so divergent from the stark clinical routines of the hospital staff, drew not only skepticism, but also quiet, insidious resistance from the traditional Korean household. The older maids, the security guards, even some of the junior medical assistants, viewed her with a mixture of suspicion and thinly veiled disdain. They whispered in hushed tones, their glances sharp and judgmental, their discomfort with her foreignness and her strange ways palpable. Amina, a woman of color in a homogeneous society, felt the weight of their unspoken prejudice, a constant, subtle pressure that added to the immense burden of her responsibility. Yet, she persevered, her spirit unbroken, her focus unwavering, driven by a deep well of empathy and an unshakable belief in the twins' potential. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, Amina's tireless efforts began to yield the tiniest of fruits. She meticulously documented every subtle change, every fleeting reaction, no matter how small. A slight turn of the head towards her voice, a momentary widening of the eyes when she sang a particular lullaby, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in a tiny hand when she gently stroked their cheek. These were not random movements. Amina was certain of it. She saw patterns, responses that, to anyone else, might have been dismissed as involuntary spasms or wishful thinking. But to Amina, they were breakthroughs, tiny beacons of communication in a vast ocean of silence. She believed with every fiber of her being that these children understood far more than anyone realized, that their minds were active and engaged, even if their bodies refused to obey. She compiled detailed notes, a testament to her observations, building a compelling case for their hidden potential, a quiet rebellion against the bleak prognosis. Jae-won's wife, a woman consumed by grief and despair, had initially withdrawn, her hope extinguished by the doctor's pronouncements. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, she began to observe Amina with growing, cautious interest. She saw the unwavering patience, the gentle persistence, the deep, abiding love that Amina poured into her children, and a fragile spark of hope began to rekindle within her own aching heart. Jae-won, the formidable leader of the Black Serpent Syndicate, maintained his facade of cold indifference, his public persona unyielding and impenetrable. Yet, behind the scenes, he was a constant, unseen observer. Through the network of hidden cameras strategically placed throughout the nursery and the twins' private wing, He watched Amina, his gaze intense and analytical. He was intrigued by her unwavering patience, her unconventional approach, her refusal to accept the limitations imposed by fate. He had always valued strength, a ruthless, decisive kind of power that crushed opposition. But in Amina, he saw a different kind of strength, one rooted in compassion, resilience, and an almost spiritual belief in the human spirit. It was a strength he didn't fully comprehend, a force that operated outside the brutal calculus of his world, yet it undeniably held his attention. He struggled internally, a silent battle raging between his ingrained expectations of powerful, healthy heirs and the harsh reality of his children's condition. He dismissed her small victories as mere coincidence, yet found himself replaying the footage, searching for the subtle nuances that Amina seemed to effortlessly perceive. A seed of curiosity had indeed been planted, and it was slowly, stubbornly, beginning to sprout. Despite her outward composure and unwavering dedication, Amina harbored her own secret struggles. She was isolated, thousands of miles from her home in America, bearing the immense weight of her responsibilities in a foreign land. The opulent villa, for all its grandeur, often felt like a gilded cage. She missed her family, the familiar rhythms of her culture, the comfort of belonging. The subtle racism she encountered daily, the constant scrutiny, chipped away at her resilience. There were nights when doubt gnawed at her, when she questioned her own ability to make a difference against such overwhelming odds, against a prognosis that seemed insurmountable. One late, lonely night, driven by an ache for connection, she made a video call to her sister back home. Her voice, usually so steady and calm, trembled with unshed tears as she confessed the depth of her loneliness, the immense pressure she felt, and the profound personal sacrifices she had made to be in Korea. She spoke of her mother's illness, her own deferred dreams, and the financial strain that had compelled her to take this unconventional, demanding job. It was a raw, vulnerable moment, revealing the hidden cost of her extraordinary strength and dedication. Amina's hands, though calloused from years of caregiving, moved with a delicate precision as she explored new methods. She had spent countless hours researching, poring over medical journals and obscure therapeutic texts, convinced there was a way to reach the twins. One afternoon, while gently massaging the small, rigid muscles of the older twin, Dae-hyun, she hummed an old Igbo lullaby her grandmother used to sing. It was a soft, rhythmic melody, a tapestry of sound woven with love and ancient wisdom. To her astonishment, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor ran through Dae-hyun's arm. Then, his eyelids, usually heavy and unresponsive, fluttered open wider than she had ever seen them before. It was a fleeting moment, easily dismissed as a spasm by a less observant person, but to Amina, it was a revelation. She repeated the lullaby, and again, the subtle, beautiful response. She began to incorporate this melody, and others, into their daily routine, using them as a key to unlock the twins' silent world. She discovered that a specific sequence of gentle touches, combined with the lullabies, consistently elicited a response from Dae-hyun. For the younger twin, Min-jun, it was the soft brush of a feather against his cheek, followed by a whispered story about a brave warrior. Each tiny intentional movement, a slight turn of the head towards her voice, a blink in response to a question, a soft, almost imperceptible sigh, was a monumental victory. Amina celebrated these triumphs with a quiet, fierce joy, even if no one else fully grasped their profound significance. She meticulously documented every flicker of progress, every minute reaction, in a journal she kept hidden under her mattress. These were not just notes. They were a testament to her unwavering belief that the twins were not merely existing, but were actively present, trapped within their own bodies, waiting to be found. The twins' mother, once a ghost of her former self, now spent more time in the nursery. She watched Amina with an intensity that had replaced her earlier despair. She saw the genuine love in Amina's eyes, the unshakable faith that radiated from her being. Slowly, tentatively, she began to mimic Amina's gentle methods, humming the lullabies, offering soft touches. She became a quiet ally, her presence a silent acknowledgement of Amina's genuine care and the undeniable miraculous changes she was bringing about. The sterile, somber atmosphere of the nursery slowly softened, infused with a nascent hope. Jae-won, from his hidden vantage point, continued his observations. He witnessed the moment Dae-hyun, in response to Amina's song, clearly and deliberately moved his hand, a movement that was undeniably intentional. The hardened exterior he presented to the world, the impenetrable mask of the crime lord, began to crack, just slightly. A flicker of paternal hope, raw and unexpected, ignited within his chest. He found himself replaying that particular footage countless times, searching for an explanation, for a trick, for anything that would allow him to dismiss it. But there was none. It was real. He began to ask questions, not directly to Amina, but to his most trusted aide, a man named Han. "What is she doing differently?" he'd demand, his voice low and gruff. "How is this possible?" He subtly probed Amina's methods, her beliefs, his questions, veiled in casual inquiries about the twins' routine. He was torn, constantly battling between his ingrained mobster persona, which demanded ruthless pragmatism and a rejection of weakness, and this burgeoning, unfamiliar yearning for his children's well-being. The thought of his heirs, once a source of immense pride and power, now brought a confusing mix of fear and an almost painful tenderness. However, not everyone in Jae-won's inner circle shared his burgeoning, if reluctant, hope. Some of his lieutenants, men hardened by years in the brutal world of the Black Serpent, viewed Amina's growing influence as a dangerous weakness. They saw the twins as a liability, a drain on resources, and a potential target for rivals. They believed Jae-won, once a man of unwavering resolve, was losing his edge, his focus diverted by these fragile, silent children and the foreign woman who cared for them. Whispers of discontent began to circulate, hushed conversations in dimly lit rooms, behind closed doors. "The boss is soft," one might grumble, distracted by sentimentality. Another would nod. "His bloodline is tainted. The syndicate needs strong leadership, not a nursery." They spoke of foreign interference and weak bloodlines, their words laced with prejudice and a thinly veiled ambition. One evening, as Amina passed by the study, she heard fragments of such a conversation. The voices were low, guttural, and filled with a venom that sent a chill down her spine. She didn't understand all the Korean words, but the tone, the emphasis on uegugin and yagan pai, was unmistakable. A cold dread settled in her stomach. She was a threat, not just to their traditions, but to their perception of power. The air in the mansion, usually heavy with the scent of expensive wood and subtle perfumes, now seemed to carry the faint, unsettling odor of treachery. She clutched her journal tighter, the small, hidden victories she documented feeling suddenly fragile in the face of such deep-seated animosity. The sanctuary she had found with the twins, the quiet hope she nurtured, now felt dangerously exposed. The chilling whispers Amina overheard that night, laced with animosity and prejudice, did not escape Jae-won's notice entirely. He was a man who moved through shadows, his senses finely attuned to the minutiae of his empire. Though he projected an image of indifference, his surveillance extended far beyond the twins' nursery. He had heard the grumbling, felt the undercurrents of discontent, and observed the hostile glances cast in Amina's direction by certain members of his staff, particularly those who had been with him for years and harbored deep-seated traditional views. One afternoon, a maid, emboldened by the silent disapproval of some lieutenants, attempted to subtly undermine Amina's authority, questioning her methods in front of the twins' mother. Before Amina could even respond, Jae-won appeared, his presence sudden and commanding. His eyes, usually cold and unreadable, held a dangerous glint as he addressed the maid in a low, severe tone. "My children's care is not a topic for casual discussion," he stated, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Amina is here at my direct order. Anyone who disrespects her, disrespects me." The message was clear, unequivocal. The maid, pale and trembling, bowed deeply and retreated, her face etched with fear. This act of protection, though unspoken between them, forged an unusual and complex bond between Amina and the mob boss. She felt a strange mix of fear, for she was acutely aware of the power he wielded, and a burgeoning gratitude. He was a ruthless man, capable of terrifying acts, yet he had, in his own way, defended her. It was a stark reminder of the precarious position she occupied, a foreigner in a powerful, dangerous household, but also a testament to the unexpected shield that Jaewon had become. The subtle dissent from the household staff largely ceased, replaced by a grudging, if still wary, acceptance of Amina's presence. Her position, once tenuous, now seemed to solidify under Jaewon's unspoken decree. However, the concerns within the Black Serpent Syndicate were not so easily quelled. The Council, a formidable group of seasoned enforcers and strategists, convened in a heavily guarded chamber, their faces grim. They expressed their concerns about the twins' future, not from a place of compassion, but of cold, calculated strategy. "The heirs are vulnerable," one elder stated, his voice raspy with age and authority. "They are a potential weakness, a reason for our rivals to strike." Another chimed in. "The leader's focus has shifted. This could be exploited." They saw the twins not as children, but as a liability, a chink in the formidable armor of Lee Jae-won. Jae-won listened, his expression impassive, but beneath the surface a storm brewed. He defended his children, not with emotional pleas, but with a quiet, steely resolve that surprised even his closest confidants. "My blood runs in their veins," he asserted, his voice resonating with an authority that brooked no argument. "They are my legacy. Any foe who targets them will face the full might of the Black Serpent." It was a rare display of emotional vulnerability, masked by an even rarer assertion of paternal love. He reminded them of his absolute authority, the years he had spent building and defending their empire. The challenge to his leadership was evident, a subtle tremor in the foundations of his power, but he met it with an unwavering gaze that reaffirmed his dominance. For now, the council relented, though their doubts lingered like a persistent shadow. With the visible protection of Jae-won and the tacit, if reluctant, approval of the council, Amina found her role expanding. She was given more resources, access to specialized equipment, and the freedom to implement her innovative therapies without constant scrutiny. She transformed a wing of the mansion into a dedicated therapy space, filled with sensory tools, specialized mats, and adaptive toys. She began to teach the twins' mother, a woman who had initially been consumed by despair, how to interact with her children effectively, how to interpret their subtle cues, and how to participate in their developmental exercises. The mansion, once a cold, forbidding fortress, began to feel slightly warmer, a subtle shift in atmosphere brought about by Amina's unwavering presence and the quiet hope she cultivated. The sounds of gentle music and Amina's soothing voice now occasionally drifted through the opulent halls, a stark contrast to the usual silence. Yet, even with these newfound freedoms, a sense of unease lingered for Amina. One evening, as she returned to her quarters, she found a new presence. A man, tall and lean, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing, stood silently by her door. He introduced himself simply as Kwon and informed her, in clipped formal Korean, that he was her personal bodyguard, assigned by Mr. Lee himself. His presence was a stark reminder of the world she inhabited, a world where even a nanny required armed protection. Was it truly for her safety, she wondered, or a more sophisticated form of surveillance? His silent, watchful figure was a constant shadow, easing her fears of external threats, but simultaneously deepening her sense of isolation and making her question the true nature of her alliance with the formidable, enigmatic Lee Jae-won. The line between protection and imprisonment felt increasingly blurred. Months bled into a year, each day a testament to Amina's unyielding dedication. Her mornings began before dawn, meticulously planning therapy sessions, her afternoons filled with the gentle, repetitive motions of exercises, and her evenings spent researching, adapting, and dreaming of breakthroughs. She spoke to the twins endlessly, narrating their world, singing lullabies she remembered from her own childhood, and reading stories in both English and Korean. She treated them not as patients, but as tiny, emergent personalities trapped within uncooperative bodies. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, a miracle unfolded. Amina was humming a familiar tune, a rhythmic, almost hypnotic melody she often used during their sensory stimulation. Suddenly, a small guttural sound escaped from the throat of the twin boy, Minjun. It was barely audible, a soft, almost imperceptible "ah." Amina froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She repeated the melody, her eyes fixed on Minjun. Again, a slightly clearer "ah." A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over her, a feeling so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She celebrated with a quiet, heartfelt whisper, praising Minjun, her voice thick with emotion. The twins' mother, who had been observing from a discreet distance, rushed forward, her face etched with a mixture of disbelief and burgeoning hope. Her own tears flowed freely as she embraced Amina, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of the impossible feat Amina had achieved. The breakthrough was undeniable, a testament to the power of persistence and unwavering belief. It was a moment of profound joy, a validation of every sleepless night, and every ounce of effort Amina had poured into these children. Jae-won, arriving home shortly after, was met with the news. He watched a recorded video Amina had quickly captured on her phone, showing Minjun's faint vocalizations. His hardened exterior, usually impenetrable, visibly softened. A raw, emotional tremor passed through him, a flicker of paternal hope so potent it was almost painful to witness. He remained silent, his gaze fixed on the screen, 1,000 unspoken emotions swirling within his usually stoic demeanor. This was more than just progress. It was the first whisper of a future he had dared not imagine. However, not everyone shared in this joy. Among Jae-won's inner circle, a disgruntled lieutenant named Kang watched the twins' progress with a growing resentment. Kang, a man whose ambition gnawed at him constantly, had always viewed the twins as a liability, a drain on Jae-won's resources and focus. He believed Jae-won's newfound paternal tenderness was a sign of weakness, an Achilles' heel that could be exploited. Kang had long harbored a desire to usurp Jae-won's position, seeing himself as the rightful, more ruthless successor to the Black Serpent Empire. He reasoned that a leader distracted by weak children was a leader ripe for overthrowing. Driven by this corrosive ambition, Kang began to secretly collude with a rival syndicate, the Red Dragon, a brutal organization based in Busan. He met with their leaders in clandestine locations, weaving a web of deceit and betrayal. His plan was insidious: destabilize Jae-won's power from within, making him appear vulnerable and indecisive, then strike when the moment was right. He planted false information within the Black Serpent's ranks, spreading rumors about Jae-won's declining health and waning influence, subtly undermining his authority. He manipulated financial records, diverting funds and creating a sense of internal disarray, all to pave the way for his eventual coup. Amina, despite her focus on the twins, was not oblivious to the shifting atmosphere within the mansion. She noticed subtle changes, hushed conversations that abruptly ceased when she entered a room, new faces among the guards who seemed to watch her with an unnerving intensity, and a palpable tension that hummed beneath the surface of the household's opulent facade. She felt an underlying unease, a sense of impending danger that she couldn't quite pinpoint, but instinctively recognized. The air itself seemed heavy with unspoken anxieties. She tried to voice her concerns to the twins' mother one afternoon, during a rare moment alone. "There's something off," Amina began, her brow furrowed. "I feel like something bad is going to happen." The mother, however, dismissed her fears with a gentle, if weary, smile. "Amina, my dear, you are new to this world. There is always tension, always whispers. It is the nature of his business." She attributed Amina's apprehension to paranoia, born from her unfamiliarity with the dangerous undercurrents of the syndicate's daily life. Amina, though unconvinced, let the matter drop. But her unease persisted, a cold knot in her stomach. One evening, while tidying the therapy room after a particularly exhausting session, Amina found something peculiar. Tucked beneath a stack of children's books, a place where it clearly didn't belong, was a small, ornately carved wooden box. It was old, dark, and intricately detailed with symbols she didn't recognize. Curious, she opened it. Inside, nestled amongst a few dried flowers, was a folded piece of parchment. It appeared to be a coded message, written in a complex series of Korean characters, interspersed with what looked like numerical sequences. It was utterly meaningless to her, but the object itself felt wrong, out of place. A stark contrast to the innocent children's items it had been hidden amongst. Her heart pounded in her chest. This was no ordinary misplaced item. It hinted at a deeper, more sinister conspiracy, a shadow stretching across the fragile peace she had worked so hard to cultivate. The quiet hum of danger she had felt now vibrated with alarming clarity. Jaewon, a man whose senses were honed by years of navigating betrayal and deception, had already begun to feel the subtle tremors beneath his carefully constructed empire. His network, vast and insidious, was a part of him, an extension of his will, and it whispered to him of discord. Small discrepancies in financial reports, unusual movements of personnel, and a growing murmur of discontent among his lower-ranking enforcers. These were not random occurrences. They were carefully orchestrated notes in a symphony of subversion, and Jaewon, the conductor of chaos, recognized the tune. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that the instability was not external. It was a rot festering from within, a betrayal by someone he had once trusted. His paranoia, a survival mechanism honed over decades, sharpened into a lethal focus. He moved with a quiet intensity, his eyes scanning every face, every gesture, searching for the telltale sign of disloyalty. Meanwhile, Amina, still reeling from the discovery of the coded message, found herself caught in a terrifying vortex of events she barely comprehended. The ornate wooden box and its cryptic contents had been a chilling premonition. Her days were still dedicated to the twins, their small triumphs, a fragile beacon in the encroaching darkness. But her nights were plagued by a gnawing anxiety. The mansion, once a place of unsettling opulence, now felt like a gilded cage, holding secrets far more dangerous than she could have imagined. One afternoon, while pushing the twins in their specially adapted stroller through a rarely used service corridor, a faint, muffled conversation drifted from an open utility closet. Her heart leaped into her throat. It was Kang's voice, low and conspiratorial, laced with venom. He was speaking Korean, too fast for her to fully grasp every word, but certain phrases pierced through the linguistic barrier. Jaewon's weakness, the twins are a liability, and most damningly, the Red Dragon will ensure our success. Amina froze, clutching the stroller handle so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her mind raced, piecing together fragments of overheard whispers, the mother's dismissive smile, and the unspoken tension that had permeated the household. The coded message, the strange new faces, the increasing agitation of the household staff. It all coalesced into a terrifying picture. Kang, the seemingly loyal lieutenant, was a viper in Jaewon's inner circle, plotting his downfall. The realization sent a cold wave of fear through her, but beneath it, a fierce protectiveness for the twins flared. She knew, with absolute certainty, that their fragile lives were intertwined with Jaewon's precarious reign. If he fell, they would be utterly exposed. The decision to confront Jaewon was not made lightly. It was born of desperation and a primal instinct to protect the innocent lives entrusted to her. She knew the risks. She was a foreigner, an outsider, daring to interfere in the brutal politics of a crime syndicate. Her evidence was circumstantial, a collection of whispered fragments and a cryptic message. Yet she could not remain silent. The twins' safety depended on it. That evening, after settling the twins for the night, Amina sought out Jaewon. She found him in his private study, a room dominated by dark wood and an aura of quiet power. He was poring over documents, his face a mask of intense concentration. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, a mirror of her own internal turmoil. She approached him, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Lee," she began, her voice trembling but resolute, "I have something to tell you. Something important." Jaewon looked up, his eyes, usually cold and unreadable, fixed on her with an unnerving intensity. "Speak, Amina," he commanded, his voice devoid of emotion, yet carrying an implicit warning. Taking a deep breath, Amina recounted her discoveries, the overheard conversation, the specific phrases, the hidden coded message she had found. She spoke of Kang's insidious betrayal, of his alliance with the rival Red Dragon Syndicate, and of his plans to exploit Jaewon's perceived weakness. As she spoke, she laid the folded parchment on his desk, its intricate symbols a silent testament to her claims. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and defiance. Jaewon listened in silence, his expression unreadable. His gaze remained fixed on her, an unwavering stare that seemed to strip away her composure layer by layer. Amina braced herself for his disbelief, for the dismissal of her fears as paranoia. But as she finished, a subtle shift occurred in his eyes. The initial disbelief, a flicker of surprise, quickly morphed into something far more terrifying. A cold, incandescent fury. He picked up the parchment, his fingers tracing the complex characters. He then looked at her again, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her instinctively recoil. He connected the dots with chilling speed, his mind, a labyrinth of strategies and counter-strategies, already assembling the pieces of the puzzle she had unwittingly provided. His gaze, usually cold and calculating, now burned with a terrifying intensity, fixed on Amina, leaving her utterly unsure if she had just saved herself and the twins, or irrevocably sealed her own dangerous fate within his brutal world. Jaewon's terrifying intensity, a silent promise of retribution, was not directed at Amina, but at the betrayal she had uncovered. The fear that had gripped her slowly receded, replaced by a chilling realization of the storm she had unleashed. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, a flicker of raw emotion crossing his face before it hardened into an impenetrable mask of resolve. He knew precisely what he had to do. The trap was set with the precision of a master strategist. Jaewon, using Amina's crucial information, began to meticulously orchestrate a cunning plan to expose Kang. He moved through his opulent mansion with a renewed sense of purpose, his usual calm demeanor now infused with a dangerous edge. He feigned weakness, subtly altering his routines, allowing carefully planted rumors of his declining health and focus to permeate his inner circle. This calculated vulnerability was designed to embolden Kang, to make him believe the time was ripe for his treacherous move. Every gesture, every word, every apparent lapse in judgment was a carefully constructed piece of a complex deception, luring his unsuspecting lieutenant deeper into the snare. He understood that Kang, driven by ambition and a twisted sense of opportunism, would seek to exploit every perceived weakness, including the twins. Their fragile existence, their dependence, was a vulnerability Jaewon had previously sought to shield. Now, he would use it as a decoy, a bait to draw out the viper. He knew Kang would target them, believing that striking at Jae-won's bloodline would destabilize his empire and cement his own ascendancy. This deliberate exposure of his children, even as a ruse, twisted a knot of pain in Jae-won's gut, but his resolve remained unwavering. The lives of his children and the stability of his syndicate depended on this desperate gamble. Amina, having witnessed the transformation in Jae-won, found herself unwillingly drawn deeper into the dark, dangerous world of the syndicate. The mansion, once a gilded cage, now felt like a war room, every corridor humming with a silent, menacing energy. She saw the calculating ruthlessness in Jae-won's eyes, a stark contrast to the flicker of humanity she had glimpsed when he looked at his children. The air thrummed with unspoken threats, the unspoken language of power and impending violence. Her moral dilemma was a heavy burden. She was horrified by the violence and manipulation that permeated every corner of this existence. Her gentle spirit recoiled from the cold-blooded pragmatism that dictated their actions. She questioned her involvement, her decision to speak out, fearing for her own life and, more acutely, for the safety of the twins. The thought of the innocent children caught in this brutal power struggle sent shivers down her spine. The ethical implications of aiding a criminal, even to prevent a greater evil, gnawed at her conscience. She was a woman of compassion and healing, not a pawn in a mob war. Yet, amidst the growing dread, she found solace only in the twins. Their small, vulnerable forms, their innocent trust, were her anchor in this storm. They were her reason for staying, her unwavering purpose. She spent every available moment with them, singing lullabies, telling stories, creating a bubble of warmth and normalcy in the heart of the looming chaos. Their small smiles, their developing babble, were the only light in her increasingly shadowed world. She clung to the belief that by protecting them, she was, in some small way, upholding a shred of goodness in a place devoid of it. Meanwhile, Kang, oblivious to the trap being meticulously laid, felt a surge of triumph. He was confident in his plan, convinced that Jae-won's focus on his ailing children had dulled his legendary sharp mind. He saw the perceived weakness as an open door, an invitation to seize control. He prepared his forces for a decisive strike, gathering his loyalists and coordinating with the rival Red Dragon Syndicate. His arrogance blinded him to the subtle shifts in the mansion's defenses, the quiet tightening of the net around him. He believed he had outsmarted Jae-won, that the empire was finally within his grasp. The tension in the mansion became palpable, a silent countdown to an inevitable conflict. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken anticipation. The household staff moved with a nervous energy, their eyes darting, sensing the impending upheaval. Amina felt it most acutely, a cold dread coiling in her stomach. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound, sent a jolt of anxiety through her. The world outside the twins' nursery seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Then, as the city lights twinkled in the distance, a sudden power outage plunged the entire mansion into darkness. The hum of electricity died, replaced by an eerie silence that was almost immediately shattered by the distant sound of breaking glass and the muffled thud of heavy boots. The attack had begun. The sudden darkness was a precursor to chaos, a terrifying curtain falling before a brutal play. A cacophony of sounds erupted, shattering the mansion's fragile peace. The distant crash of glass gave way to the unmistakable staccato of gunfire, echoing through the vast hallways, followed by the concussive boom of explosions that rattled the very foundations of the opulent fortress. Screams, both human and mechanical, joined the horrifying symphony, painting a vivid soundscape of invasion. Kang's forces, emboldened by the cover of night and their initial breach, swarmed through the mansion's defenses, a relentless tide of violence threatening to engulf everything in its path. Jae-won's loyalists, hardened men forged in the Syndicate's brutal crucible, met the invaders with a ferocity born of unwavering allegiance. They fought fiercely, a desperate defense of their leader and his family. Each bullet fired and every blow exchanged a testament to their readiness to die for the Black Serpent. The mansion, once a symbol of untouchable power, had become a war zone, illuminated intermittently by muzzle flashes and the searing glow of fires ignited by the skirmishes. Amina, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, reacted instinctively. She snatched the twins from their cots, cradling them tightly against her chest, their small bodies a fragile weight in her arms. The nursery, once a sanctuary, was now a potential death trap. She knew she had to find a safer place, a true refuge amidst the storm. Guided by a primal instinct, she stumbled towards a fortified room, a hidden panic room Jaewon had shown her during one of his rare, almost paternal moments of instruction. The thick steel door, designed to withstand siege, clanged shut behind them, plunging them into a suffocating silence that was only punctuated by the distant, muffled echoes of the battle raging outside. She huddled in a corner, pressing the twins closer, her body trembling not just from fear, but from a fierce, protective resolve. Outside, Jaewon moved through the besieged mansion like a phantom, a living embodiment of the Black Serpent's ruthlessness. The perceived weakness that Kang had so foolishly banked upon was a carefully crafted illusion. Jaewon, a master tactician honed by years of brutal warfare, unleashed his own hidden forces, men positioned with chilling precision, waiting for this very moment. He systematically dismantled Kang's attack, turning the tables with a devastating counteroffensive that revealed his true, terrifying strength. Every move was calculated, every order delivered with a cold, precise authority that brooked no argument. His rage was not the wild, uncontrolled fury of a desperate man, but a cold, precise instrument of vengeance. He moved through the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, a shadow among shadows, eliminating threats with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. His eyes, usually pools of hardened ice, now burned with an infernal glow, reflecting the fires of destruction and the unwavering focus of a predator. He was the coiled serpent, striking with venomous speed, reminding everyone, especially Kang, why he was the undisputed leader. The mansion became his hunting ground, and his enemies, the prey. Deep within the fortified room, Amina felt the vibrations of the explosions and the heavy thuds that resonated through the walls. The twins, surprisingly, remained quiet, their small hands clutching her clothing, their eyes wide but unseeing in the darkness. As the fighting intensified, a terrifying realization dawned on Amina. The fortified room, while offering protection from direct assault, was still within the mansion. If the structural integrity was compromised, or if the fires spread, the twins would be in direct danger. A wave of adrenaline surged through her, overriding her fear. She could not wait. She had to move them. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Amina carefully unlatched the heavy door. A faint, acrid smell of smoke wafted in, along with the chilling sounds of distant screams. She knew the mansion's layout intimately, having spent countless hours navigating its corridors. Clutching the twins even tighter, she began her desperate journey. She moved with a newfound courage, her every step deliberate, her senses acutely aware of her surroundings. She navigated through the war-torn mansion, a silent prayer on her lips, her body a shield for the vulnerable children in her arms. She ducked past overturned furniture, sidestepped fallen debris, and skirted around the grim tableau of the battle. She was no warrior, but her resolve to protect the twins transformed her into an unstoppable force. As she cautiously turned a corner, her heart leaped into her throat. Standing directly in her path, silhouetted against the flickering glow of a distant fire, was a hooded figure. It was not one of Kang's men, whose uniform she had glimpsed through cracks in the doors, nor one of Jaewon's loyalists. This figure was different, taller, broader, their face obscured by the deep shadow of their hood. A chilling sense of dread washed over Amina, a feeling that this encounter was far more sinister than a mere stray enemy combatant. This was someone else entirely. An unknown variable in an already terrifying equation, and their presence sent a cold shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the night's frigid air. The hooded figure remained motionless, a silent sentinel blocking Amina's path. Her breath hitched, a primal fear seizing her. This was not the chaotic violence of a gang war. This was something colder, more deliberate. Her mind raced, desperately searching for an escape route. But the twins, nestled securely in her arms, were her sole focus. She instinctively tightened her grip, prepared to shield them with her own body. Suddenly, a familiar, guttural roar echoed from behind the figure, followed by the unmistakable sound of a body hitting the floor with a sickening thud. The hooded figure crumpled, revealing a silent, almost spectral figure standing over them. One of Jaewon's elite guards, his face a mask of grim determination. Her rescuer simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement, before disappearing back into the shadows, leaving Amina to navigate the remaining distance to safety. The first light of dawn painted the Seoul skyline in hues of pale gray and orange, revealing the full extent of the night's devastation. The once impenetrable mansion now bore the scars of battle. Shattered windows, scorched walls, and the lingering acrid smell of gunpowder and blood. Ambulances and forensic teams moved with grim efficiency, their sirens a mournful dirge. Casualties were heavy on Kang's side, a testament to Jaewon's overwhelming force and strategic brilliance. His loyalists, though wounded, stood victorious, their faces etched with exhaustion but alight with a fierce pride. The loyalty of those who had fought for Jaewon was not merely solidified. It was forged anew in the crucible of fire and fury, bound by a shared victory and a common enemy. Amidst the wreckage, Jaewon emerged, a formidable figure despite the bandage wrapped around his forearm and the dark smears on his tailored suit. His eyes, though still burning with a cold intensity, held a flicker of something else now. Relief, perhaps, or a newfound appreciation for what he still possessed. He moved with a heavy grace through the ruined halls, his gaze sweeping over the scene, assessing the damage, calculating the cost. His empire had been shaken, undoubtedly, but it had not fallen. His eyes finally landed on Amina, who sat huddled in a relatively untouched corner of the grand hall, the twins now sleeping soundly in a makeshift crib she had fashioned from cushions. Her clothes were torn, her face smudged with dirt and streaked with tears, but she was alive, and the children were safe. A wave of profound gratitude, a sensation utterly foreign to the ruthless mob boss, washed over him. He walked towards her, his footsteps echoing in the quiet aftermath. "Amina," he said, his voice a low rumble, devoid of its usual command, tinged with a raw emotion she had never heard before. "You saved them. You saved my children." His words were simple, yet they carried the weight of an unspoken promise, a profound acknowledgement of her courage and unwavering dedication amidst the chaos. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before gently resting on her shoulder. It was a rare, almost vulnerable display of emotion from a man who rarely showed anything but calculated control. He understood, in that moment, that she had not just protected his heirs. She had protected his very legacy, the fragile hope for a future he had almost lost. She had become an unexpected pillar in his life, a beacon of light in his dark world. Kang, the architect of the betrayal, was brought before Jaewon, his face bruised and broken, his eyes filled with a desperate animalistic fear. The meeting took place in what remained of Jaewon's private study, the air thick with the smell of smoke and the unspoken promise of retribution. Jaewon's gaze was cold, merciless, reflecting the wrath of a betrayed king. The words exchanged were few, the verdict swift and brutal, a stark reminder of the syndicate's unyielding justice. Amina, though shielded from the direct view, heard the chilling sounds that followed, the muffled cries, the sickening thuds, and then the profound, terrifying silence. It solidified her understanding of the world she had inadvertently stepped into, a world where loyalty was paramount and betrayal carried the ultimate price. Later that day, as the last of the cleanup crews departed and a fragile calm settled over the mansion, Jaewon sought Amina out again. He found her by the window, gazing out at the scarred landscape, a profound weariness etched on her face. He stood before her, his posture still regal, but his eyes held a new depth. "Amina," he began, his voice softer now, "you have proven your loyalty, your courage, and your invaluable worth to this family. What you did last night, it was beyond anything I could have asked. I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid with mere money." He paused, his gaze intense, piercing through her exhaustion. "I want you to stay. Not just as their caregiver, but as a permanent, indispensable part of this household. I want you to continue nurturing them, guiding them. And in return," he continued, his voice dropping to a low, persuasive tone, "you will have everything you need, absolute protection, and a place of honor within my family. No one will ever threaten you or the children again." He extended his hand, not in a handshake, but as an unspoken offer, a bond forged in blood and loyalty. It was an unexpected proposal, one that could change her life forever, binding her closer to his dangerous world, yet promising a security she had never known. The weight of his words hung in the air, a silent challenge, a profound choice laid before her. Amina stood at the precipice of a life-altering decision, the weight of Jaewon's offer pressing down on her. The silence in the room was profound, broken only by the distant sounds of the city slowly reawakening. She looked at his extended hand, a symbol not just of protection, but of an unspoken pact, a commitment to a life intertwined with the formidable leader of the Black Serpent Syndicate. Her mind raced, replaying the terror of the previous night, the desperate flight through the burning mansion, and the miraculous survival of the twins. She thought of their small, vulnerable forms, their utter dependence on her, and the flickering light of hope they represented. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about them. With a deep breath that steadied her resolve, she met Jaewon's intense gaze, and in a silent gesture, accepted his offer. Thus, Amina transitioned from a hired caregiver to an indispensable fixture in the Lee household. Her role expanded far beyond the initial duties, evolving into that of a trusted confidant, a silent advisor, and, in many ways, a surrogate family member. The household staff, once wary and occasionally hostile, now regarded her with a mix of respect and deference, understanding that her position was cemented by Jaewon's explicit protection. No one dared question her authority or her methods when it came to the twins. She became a respected outsider, navigating the complex social dynamics of the mansion with a quiet dignity that earned her an almost mythical status among the syndicate's inner circle. Her bond with the twins, Ji-hoon and Min-seo, deepened irrevocably. They responded to her touch, her voice, her unwavering presence, their progress continuing at a pace that astounded every medical professional who had initially given them such a bleak prognosis. Jaewon, in turn, underwent a subtle yet profound transformation. The events of the Night of Fire had etched new lines on his face and in his soul. His priorities, once singularly focused on the expansion and dominion of his empire, now visibly shifted. He dedicated more time to his children, his formidable presence softened by the sight of their small, developing forms. He would often watch Amina interact with them, a quiet, almost tender expression replacing his usual stern facade. He found a different kind of fulfillment in their small victories, a raw, paternal joy that had been dormant for so long. While he still commanded his vast criminal enterprise with an iron fist, there was a newfound emphasis on protecting his family, a fierce, unwavering commitment that now defined his leadership. His relationship with Amina, once purely professional, evolved into one of mutual respect, a tacit understanding that transcended their vastly different backgrounds and blurred the professional lines that had once rigidly defined their interactions. He trusted her implicitly, a trust he rarely bestowed upon anyone, and her insights, particularly concerning the twins, held significant weight. The twins, Ji-hoon and Min-seo, continued to surprise everyone with their remarkable progress. Months turned into a year, and their faint sounds had given way to more clearly articulated words, their subtle movements blossoming into more expressive gestures. They were a living testament to Amina's tireless dedication and Jaewon's unexpected, fierce love. Their initial diagnosis of being unable to move or speak seemed like a distant nightmare. They were showing not just physical progress, but a burgeoning intelligence and unique personalities that defied every expectation. Ji-hoon, the elder, was observant and thoughtful, often communicating through his expressive eyes before attempting words. Min-seo, though slightly smaller, was more vocal, her laughter a sweet melody that now occasionally echoed through the once somber halls of the mansion. One quiet afternoon, as Amina was teaching Min-seo to identify different animal sounds from a picture book, a moment of profound significance unfolded. Ji-hoon, who had been silently watching from his custom-made chair, his gaze fixed on Amina, suddenly spoke. His voice, though still soft and with a slight tremor, was clear. "Amina," he said, his eyes wide and earnest. "You are our light." Amina froze, the picture book slipping from her grasp. She stared at Ji-hoon, her heart swelling with an emotion so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. It wasn't just the clarity of his words, or the fact that he had spoken unprompted and with such intentionality. It was the depth of understanding, the raw, unfiltered truth of his statement that shocked her to her core. He had articulated the very essence of her presence in their lives, a sentiment she had only dared to hope they might feel. It was a revelation, a confirmation that her journey, her sacrifices, and her unwavering belief in them had not only been worth it, but had forged an unbreakable bond that transcended all boundaries. Even as the twins, Ji-hoon and Min-seo, blossomed under Amina's unwavering care, and Jaewon found a new, profound purpose in his paternal role. The shadows of his past lingered, threatening to engulf their fragile peace. The Black Serpent Syndicate, though purged of Kang's internal treachery, remained a formidable entity in a brutal world, and its leader's perceived softness became a dangerous vulnerability. Rival syndicates, ever watchful, saw Jaewon's newfound focus on his family not as a strength, but as a distraction, an opening to exploit. Whispers of a weakened leader, a distracted boss began to circulate through the criminal underworld, carried on the cold soul winds. Jaewon, acutely aware of these shifting currents, found himself in a perpetual tightrope walk, balancing the tender demands of his family life with the ruthless, unforgiving necessities of maintaining his dangerous empire. Every decision was now weighed against the potential impact on Ji-hoon and Min-seo, a burden he carried with a quiet, fierce determination. Amina, now more attuned to the intricate web of dangers that surrounded the Lee household, felt a constant hum of anxiety beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic existence. She had witnessed firsthand the raw brutality of this world, the swift, merciless justice meted out by Jaewon. Her initial fear had evolved into a deep understanding, and with that understanding came a heightened sense of protectiveness. She worried for the twins, for their innocent vulnerability in a world so steeped in violence. She worried for Jaewon, too, recognizing the immense pressure he was under and the impossible choices he often faced. The mansion, once a sanctuary, now felt like a gilded cage, always under silent siege. Yet, amidst the ever-present tension, Amina herself had undergone a remarkable transformation. She had arrived in Seoul, a stranger in a strange land, bearing the weight of her own sacrifices and the burden of expectation. Now, she had found a purpose, a form of belonging she never could have imagined. This unlikely family, forged in adversity and bound by an unspoken love, had become her anchor. She had faced down prejudice, navigated cultural barriers, and proven her worth in a world that initially sought to dismiss her. In doing so, she had discovered a reservoir of strength within herself she never knew she possessed. The quiet, resilient woman who had first stepped onto Korean soil had blossomed into a confident, indispensable figure, her spirit shining brightly against the backdrop of the syndicate's dark world. Her thoughts often drifted to her own future. What did it hold for her here, in this country so far from home, yet now so intricately woven into the fabric of her being? Was this a temporary chapter, or had fate irrevocably tied her to this extraordinary family? The idea of leaving, of returning to a life without Ji-hoon and Min-seo's laughter, without Jae-won's quiet nods of approval, felt almost unbearable. She started to consider her long-term future in Korea, a future she never planned, yet now deeply desired. Jae-won, in turn, poured vast resources into the twins' education and specialized care, sparing no expense. He brought in the best therapists, educators, and developmental specialists from around the world, creating a bespoke environment designed to maximize their potential. His dreams for them had shifted dramatically from the initial, rigid expectations of powerful heirs. Now he simply wanted them to thrive, to live full, rich lives despite the challenges their condition presented. He yearned for them to inherit his resilience, his unwavering will, but also, and perhaps more importantly, Amina's profound compassion, her gentle spirit, and her boundless capacity for love. He envisioned a future where they would not be defined by their limitations, but by their unique strengths, their growing intellects, and the extraordinary journey they had already undertaken. He saw in them a chance for a different legacy, one built not on fear and power, but on endurance, love, and the breaking of barriers. Then, one crisp autumn morning, a new tremor ran through the carefully constructed piece of the mansion. A mysterious, encrypted message, meticulously routed and seemingly untraceable, arrived for Jae-won. It was brief, chillingly precise, and devoid of any overt threat. Yet its content struck a cold dread into Jae-won's heart. It spoke of his precious little lights, a direct reference to the twins, a phrase only a handful of people had ever heard him use. The message contained details about their daily routines, their specific medical needs, and even a veiled allusion to Ji-hoon's recent profound statement to Amina. It was clear. A new, formidable enemy had emerged. An adversary who not only knew about his greatest vulnerability, his children, but who had been observing them with terrifying intimacy, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. The fragile peace was shattered, and a new, even more dangerous chapter had just begun. The encrypted message, a chilling whisper from the abyss, had shattered the delicate peace Jae-won had meticulously built around his family. It was a stark reminder that even within the fortified walls of his mansion, danger always lurked, a predatory gaze fixed on his most precious possessions. But this time, the threat felt different, more insidious, less about power struggles, and more about a calculated personal assault on his very soul. This new enemy understood his vulnerability, his profound, almost desperate love for his children, a love that had transformed him in ways he never thought possible. Jae-won, once solely a ruthless mob boss, a figure carved from cold steel and unyielding ambition, was now a complex tapestry of contradictions. The fear he once inspired was now tempered by an unexpected humanity, forged in the crucible of his children's challenges and Amina's unwavering compassion. His love for Ji-hoon and Min-seo, and his profound respect for the woman who had brought light into their lives, had softened the edges of his hardened exterior, revealing a depth of emotion he had long suppressed. He understood now that his legacy could not simply be built on fear and dominance. It had to encompass protection, growth, and ultimately, a different kind of power. He sought a new way to protect his family and ensure their future, a path that might even mean fundamentally changing the nature of his empire. The old ways, The constant cycle of violence and retribution felt increasingly hollow in the face of his children's innocent smiles. He began to contemplate a radical shift, a move towards legitimacy, not for his own sake, but for theirs. The thought of them inheriting a life forever shadowed by the syndicate's darkness was unbearable. He envisioned a future where they could walk freely, unburdened by the sins of their father, a future he was willing to fight for with every fiber of his being. Amina, observing this profound transformation, made her own conscious decision. The thought of leaving, once a distant possibility, now seemed unthinkable. She had found a home, not just within the walls of this opulent mansion, but within the hearts of this unconventional family. Her purpose, once a professional duty, had blossomed into a profound personal commitment. She was a bridge between two vastly different worlds, a symbol of hope and resilience in a place that had once seemed so foreign and intimidating. She had faced down prejudice, navigated cultural barriers, and proven her worth in a world that initially sought to dismiss her. Now she fully embraced her role, the love she shared with Ji-hoon and Min-seo, and the unspoken bond she held with Jae-won, a bond forged in shared challenges and mutual respect. The twins, now older and blossoming under Amina's tireless care and Jae-won's unwavering support, continued to show remarkable progress. Ji-hoon, with his quiet intensity, could now articulate complex thoughts, his eyes gleaming with understanding. Min-seo, ever the more expressive, filled the once silent halls with her infectious laughter and increasingly clear pronouncements. They communicated, interacted, and explored their world with an enthusiasm that defied their initial bleak prognosis. They were a vivid testament to the transformative power of love, unwavering dedication, and the breaking of barriers that society often placed upon those deemed different. Their journey was not just a medical miracle. It was a testament to the human spirit's boundless capacity for growth. The Black Serpent Syndicate, while still a formidable power in the underworld, was subtly shifting beneath Jae-won's evolving leadership. His lieutenants, once focused solely on expansion and dominance, now understood that their leader's priorities had changed. The empire was still ruthless when necessary, but its core purpose was subtly reoriented towards safeguarding its future, a future intrinsically linked to the well-being of the twins. The whispers of a new enemy, the shadowy figure who knew so much about his children, only solidified Jae-won's resolve to build a more secure, more legitimate world for them. In the final, quiet moments of a sun-drenched afternoon, the scene unfolded like a painting. Jae-won, his face softened by a gentle smile, sat on a plush rug, Ji-hoon leaning against his side, carefully placing building blocks together. Across from them, Amina read a brightly illustrated storybook to Min-seo, whose small hand reached out to trace the pictures, a soft murmur of recognition escaping her lips. The air was filled with a sense of peace, a quiet contentment that belied the tumultuous journey that had brought them here. It was a picture of an unconventional family, bound not by blood alone, but by an extraordinary shared history, facing an uncertain future with shared strength and an unspoken promise of enduring love. In the most unexpected of circumstances, amidst the shadows of a dangerous world, Jae-won had found his redemption, and with it, the true meaning of family.